Events take place in a highly developed world of advanced technologies. One day, in the middle of this world, teleports to so-called dungeons began to appear. Ordinary miners used these portals and extracted valuable ores. Each dungeon includes a large amount of resources. In addition to useful things, there were also many threats in the caves in the form of monsters, so players appeared to counter them. Players are responsible for eliminating enemies inside the dungeon. But our hero was only a miner, entering the dungeon to extract minerals after clearing the caves of monsters. Jiang Mingyu was exhausted at work, but the pay was quite good. In addition, a pleasant bonus was that physical activity made his body muscular. When the main character was working, a friend came up to him from behind and hit the guy, because he did not answer to his name. Jiang Mingyu complained why old Fan immediately beat him and asked why the man came here, because it was already hot in the dungeon. In fact, the comrade did not come of his own free will, but only to give the salary to the main character. The guy immediately took his money from Fan and was very happy. A friend hinted that Jiang Mingyu could treat him after work, but he refused. Fan realized that our hero was still saving up to buy the awakening stone, and said that the guy had better forget about his dream, because it was too expensive and dangerous. The husband said that his nephew also shouted about his desire to become a player, and then his parents spent all the money on the awakening stone, but in the end the boy was scared when he saw the dungeon. The awakening stone was the core of every dungeon, as well as the key to joining the players, who were divided into 3 classes, namely warriors, scouts and mages. Because the dungeons were owned by guilds, it was difficult for ordinary people to get into the awakening stone, so even those belonging to low ranks were worth a lot. Jiang Mingyong noted that he still does not have the opportunity to sit on his parents' neck. His sister would soon go to university, and his aunt was finding it difficult to cope with daily expenses. The guy hoped to become a player of at least the lowest rank in order to ease his aunt's burden. Suddenly a stranger approached the friends and laughed at the main character's dream. The pompous guy mocked the fact that the little ant dreamed of turning into a phoenix and flying to the top. Jiang Mingyun was seething because of the mockery of him, and old Fan tried to calm the guy down, because the stranger was a member of the Shangjin Guild. The main character asked what was wrong with his aspirations. The guild member explained that the miner would need to dig for ore for years to afford the awakening stone. The guy began to tremble with anger when they began to tell him what to do. The rich man recommended that the main character stop dreaming and look reality in the eye. Old man Fan was scared, because he didn't want their team's client to start a fight with the miner. The guild member looked at his friend so furiously that a very tense atmosphere formed around him for a second. In the end, the rich man decided to restrain himself and was upset that he could not have fun. He ordered the miners to get to work, because the guild had hired them so they wouldn't stand around and talk. Old Feng finally calmed down and was glad that Jiang Mingyong was able to restrain himself. As the awakening stone fell, the man explained that this pompous guy had the name Zhang Miao and was a spoiled major, but a true B-rank player. Then the core cracked, and old Fan went on to say that if the main character had attacked first, then the guild member could well have killed the guy in self-defense. The comrade suggested that the main character should not give a damn about the words of the unpleasant Zhang Miao, because young people tend to have ambitions. Jiang Mingyong assured that he was fine when a small pebble fell on his head. After some time, a whole rain of cave particles fell on the guy. Then old Fun realized that things were bad and the dungeon began to collapse. A scream echoed through the cave, announcing a terrible accident. The miners, in panic, began to run to the gate under stones that fell on their heads, and the wounded shouted for help. Old Fun grabbed the dumbfounded Jiang Mingyong to save him from the rubble. Then Jiang Mingyong noticed that the exit from the mine began to decrease. He suspected that something had happened to the awakening stone, otherwise the gate would not have disappeared. A comrade urged our hero so that he could escape. Suddenly, a huge stone fell from the ceiling onto Old Fun. Jiang Mingyong, seeing the unfortunate fate of his friend, screamed furiously throughout the cave. The man was severely crushed, causing purple blood to flow from under the boulder. The shocked guy hoped that his comrade was still alive and there was hope for his salvation. Under the rain of stones, Jiang Mingyong hoped with all his might to move the stone from its place. Barely alive, Fan asked the guy to leave him here. He told Jiang Mingyun to run to the gate, otherwise he would not have time to escape from the cave. The main character, crying, tried to save his friend and promised to buy him a drink. Suddenly, a calm Zhang Miao appeared nearby, simply mocking the helplessness of the miners. Jiang Mingyong immediately recognized the pompous guy with whom he had just had a conversation a few moments ago. Our hero begged the player to save his friend, because the fighter had to have powers. The major recoiled from the miner and said that he was not going to help an ordinary ant. He calmly walked into the portal, saying that the miners just need to accept their fate. The main character was angry that for Zhang Miao, ordinary people were just ants. The major confirmed that he really thought so about the miner and made a movement with his hand in the air. A small ball of energy formed near his finger. A strong energy stream crashed into our hero and knocked him off his feet. The player threw Jiang Mingyong a long distance to show how much of a gap there was between the major and ordinary people. The broken protagonist, bleeding, understood that he could not win the fight for life. Zhang Miao believed that death in such a hole was suitable for a poor miner. Jiang Mingyong looked at the portal, which was getting smaller every second, but could not believe that everything would end like this. Then the events moved to the guy's home, where the sister is worried that he still hasn't returned home. Auntie doesn't like the fact that the girl called the main character brother and reassured her that he was fine. Meanwhile, the news was talking about some urgent events. The presenter talked about how a dungeon collapse occurred in the city today. The woman said that the dungeon belonged to the Shangjin Guild, and at the time of the tragedy, De Chuan's team was working there. The girl was shocked because the news said that many members of her brother's team were killed or seriously injured. She immediately turned to her mother because she was very worried about Jiang Mingyong. The girl called her to the TV so that she could see everything with her own eyes. The woman could not understand what shocked and frightened her daughter so much. The girl pointed to the screen and said that something bad had happened to her brother. The news presenter noted that, according to the latest data, 5 people from the team were killed, 18 were injured and 2 were missing. Mother and daughter burst into tears at such bad news. Suddenly there was a knock on the door of the house and they immediately ran to meet their guest. A beaten Jiang Mingyong stood in the doorway, apologizing for losing his keys. Of course, these were trifles for his relatives. The main thing was that the guy was alive. The main character was glad that he was able to return to his family. Events go back in time to the moment when Jiang Mingyong was in the blocked cave. The guy's whole body was in great pain, so he could not move. It looks like the main character's ribs were broken, plus he had lost too much blood. Jiang Mingyong felt that his consciousness was gradually fading, and his eyes began to darken. The main character never thought that he would die in such a place. In his head, he remembered his aunt, who often scolded her nephew for leaving dirty clothes scattered around the house. Also flashed through the memory of his sister, whose mousse cake he once stole, which angered her. At that moment the guy realized that he had an incredible thirst for life. Jiang Mingyong screamed because he didn't want to die in this dark, cold cave. A cracked awakening stone rolled towards his hand. Having touched the main character, the stone began to shine brightly and release its energy outward. The guy didn't understand why everything suddenly lit up like that. He immediately received a message about the activation of the Abyss system. The system warned that its user was close to death and had 30 seconds, so she invited the guy to become the possessor of the Abyss. Beaten by life, Jiang Mingyong was incredibly surprised when he read this message. While the timer for the last seconds of our hero's life was running out, he still continued to think that this was just a funny joke. In the end, Jiang Mingyong agreed to become the Abyss possessor because it could save his life. The guy didn't care who he would become, because he wanted to survive at any cost. The system congratulated the main character on gaining the status of possessor of the Abyss. A bright light surrounded him and he felt a surge of strength to survive. Further events continue in the morning the next day, when the main character got enough sleep after a hard night of struggle for survival. Without getting out of bed, Jiang Mingyuna decided to study the obtained void system. The guy was wondering what this technology was. All he remembered was that after the golden light appeared, he found himself in front of the door of his own house. At first, Jiang Mingyong thought it was magic, but then he realized that it was unlikely that there could be a person walking freely at night and using teleportation magic. Then the guy realized that the interface open in front of him was like a menu in an online game. The stat points are pretty clear and could be distributed just like in the game. The way the points are distributed at the beginning corresponds to one of the classes, namely warrior, scout or mage. The guy, noticing the possibility of his own distribution of characteristics, realized that he had become a full-fledged player. The first task from the system was to earn hobby points, but our hero did not understand what this was. At that moment, the sister quietly entered the room and cleared her throat to attract attention. Jiang Mingyong noticed that his wounds had healed very quickly, and guessed that this was due to the awakening of the system. The sister could not stand it and shouted in irritation and asked and the guy would finally get out of bed. The main character asked her to knock on the door when she enters the boy's room. The girl mockingly noted that she did not know that her brother was doing his dirty deeds in his room, and invited him to breakfast, because it was already late. Jiang Mingyong asked if his sister had seen the void system panel. She didn't see, so she thought that the guy hit himself yesterday. The sister realized that Jiang Mingyong was fine and he could do everything himself. In addition, the girl asked her brother not to engage in such dangerous work in the future. She was going to take out student loans and go part-time to support her college life. Jiang Mingyong was happy because he thought that Taozi was so worried about him. The girl, a little ashamed, confirmed the protagonist's guesses. She joked that when our hero dies, no one will earn money for her waste. The guy said that his sister is a demon and not at all nice. Taozi heard a knock on the door and realized that her friends had already arrived, so she told her brother to come down and eat. They continued to persistently knock on the door, so the girl asked the guests to wait a minute. She thought there were friends outside the door, so she immediately asked why they came so early. From the girl's amazed reaction, one can understand that strangers were standing there. Taozi wanted to quickly close the door, but someone's foot prevented her from doing so. The man with an ominous smile said that the girl had nothing to fear. She still continued to look at the strangers with incredible fear in her eyes. Suspicious men tried to assure her that they were not bad guys. Events moved to the street where the boy was playing ball. He pointed his finger at the strange strangers and called his mother, but she told her son not to say anything unnecessary and quickly brought him in. One of them approached Taojia and asked if Bai Xianyong was her father. He showed the girl an IOU from her dad, who owed these men money. 3 years ago, Taozi's dad borrowed 500,000 from the company, but today, taking into account interest, he already owes 5 million. The agreement stated that in any case, his debt would be paid by his children. Taozi believed that the father himself got into debt, therefore he himself had to pay it off, and the family was only a victim. The stranger pretended that he felt sorry for the debtor's daughter. The husband understood that the gambler had left his wife and child and was running away, but according to the agreement, it was the family that had to pay the debt, so he grabbed Taoji by the hand. He hinted that their company was not a charity, so if they did not receive the money, they would give the girl the opportunity to earn it. The stranger began to pull poor Taoji to take him away, but she leaned on and screamed. Suddenly he slapped the defenseless girl and ordered her to remain silent. The man's partner was tired of waiting so long and wanted to drag Taozi by force. The elder ordered not to touch the girl's face, because she would not be able to earn money without him. Having intimidated the debtor's daughter, the bandits invited her to calmly follow them, and then there would be less suffering. Finally, the main character came to the threshold to save his sister. The guy came out of the bath, so he had foam in his hair, and asked what these scumbags wanted to do with the girl. The strangers were surprised by the appearance of their victim's brother. In the end, they laughed and called Jiang Mingyong a suffocator. The main character jumped out of his seat and ran towards the men. One of the bandits thought that the guy had watched films and imagined himself as the main character. Suddenly, Jiang Mingyun hit the big man with incredible force. The girl and the other man were surprised by this development of events. Ambal did not like the determination of our hero, so he decided not to tolerate such antics. He just held the girl's savior by the hand and the guy was in pain. The man continued to squeeze Jiang Mingyong by the end, causing the main character to no longer stand it. Then Jiang Mingyong realized that the balance of power was not in his favor, so he proposed resolving the conflict without violence. But the guy's opponent could no longer be stopped, and he struck our hero in the stomach. The attack was so powerful that a drop of blood flew out of Jiang Mingyong's mouth. Taozi begged the bandits not to touch her brother. The main character assured that everything was fine with him. The older man mockingly remarked that everyone in this family was a loser. The strong young man's name was Lao Huang and he was an underground fighter, so it was not so easy to knock him out. The bandits decided not to waste time, so as not to run into the police, so they grabbed Taozi by the hair. Jiang Mingyong shouted for them to let the innocent sister go. The men were not going to do this and stated that in order to save the girl, the main character must bring enough money to buy her freedom. Then the guy decided to act radically and ordered the Abyss system to distribute all available points into power. After distributing the points to the desired stat, Jiang Mingyong ordered the men to stand where they were now, which made them quite surprised. The guy saw that they were not following his orders, so he sarcastically asked if the bandits understood human language. The main character repeated that he demands that his sister be released. Then Lao Huang became interested in the courage of, in his opinion, the loser Jiang Mingyong. He roughly threw Taoji to the floor. Bandy realized that he had to break a couple of bones for the guy to give up. The older man warned his partner not to get too carried away and kill the guy, like the last time. Lao Huang invited our hero to come closer for a fight. The sister began to worry about Jiang Mingyong. The main character did not wait and ran with determination towards his opponent. Now events returned to Jiang Mingyong's childhood. His sister was crying a lot again because someone had hurt her again. Our hero once again defended the girl from fighters. One of the hooligans shot with all his might into little Jiang Mingyong's nose. With the help of a stick, our hero resolutely responded to this blow. A group of hooligans were scared when they saw how the boy dealt with their comrade. It turned out that Jiang Mingyong accidentally killed his opponent. The main character was incredibly furious and looked at the other boys, breathing heavily after the fight. He called them stupid bandits and warned that if they insulted Taoji again, he would kill them all. The children thought that our hero was a psychopath, so they got scared and ran away from him. The sister came up and took her brave savior by the hand. She saw the blood on Jiang Mingyong's face, so she thought that he was probably in pain. The guy laughed and assured that he was very strong and did not feel pain. These memories were very reminiscent of the current situation, when Jiang Mingyong was again protecting his now adult sister from robbers. Lao Huang noted that the main character had a strong fighting spirit, but still, for such a giant, the guy's blows were like a massage. Such stupid ridicule made Jiang Mingyong even more angry. Eventually, he broke through Lao Huang's defenses and was able to get close to his face. As a result, the professional fighter received a strong blow from, as it seemed earlier, a complete loser. Taozi and Lao Huang's partner were shocked to see such an unexpected development. The big man quickly flew to the ground and could not do anything with such a strong attack. Everyone around could not understand where such an inconspicuous guy had so much strength. Jiang Mingyong was also surprised that only 20 points could provide him with such power. The older man could not believe that his comrade could be knocked out with just one blow. He guessed that the main character was the player and thought that his previous behavior was just a game. At this moment, the void system notified Jiang Mingyong that he had received 10 awe points. The guy wondered what this could mean. He thought that the name had a literal meaning, so he only wanted people around him to feel awe of him. Something distracted the protagonist from the message of the Abyss system. The surviving bandit tried to escape unnoticed while Jiang Mingyong was distracted. The guy angrily shouted for the bastard to stop. Because the man tried to hide, he offered him a blow for 30 strength points. The bandit begged Jiang Mingyong to wait and not beat him up. Suddenly he fell to his knees in front of our hero. He bowed down before the guy and begged him to spare him. The main character asked in disgust if the man really had no gangster pride. The bandit explained that they were debt collectors and were just doing their job. He explained that until the debt is closed, even if the guy beats the collector, someone else will come to continue to collect the debt. Jiang Mingyong admitted that the man was right, so for a peaceful life, this problem must be solved. The guy asked who the collectors worked for and where the office was located. The bandit said that the office was located in Huigong Mall, and the boss's name was Meng Fei. He was about to get out of harm's way, but Jiang Mingyong stopped him and asked if it was he who squeezed Taozi's hand a few moments ago. The husband began to tremble and lie that it happened completely by accident. He apologized with tears in his eyes and assured that he was wrong and understood all his mistakes. Despite all the pleas, the main character decided to be cruel to his sister's offender and as a result received 10 awe points. Sometime after the massacre of the bandits, Jiang Mingyong sat on the bed and thought that awe points served as experience in the Abyss system and helped to move to the next level. But the main character noticed that when he leveled up, he was given only 2 measly character points. Then the guy realized that he was too hasty, distributing all the points into strength, because he wanted to be a well-rounded fighter. After analyzing that the intelligence level was sufficient, he decided to distribute the free points into agility. In the end, our hero decided to look at what award he received for his performance, and saw something incredible there. As a result, he gained the aura of loser skill, which was that the importance of Jiang Mingyong's presence was reduced and everyone considered him weak. The main character did not like such new skills at all, so now he considered the system stupid, because it gave him false hope. Meanwhile, Taoji told her brother that she was going to the library with her friends. The guy asked her to be careful and return home as quickly as possible. Now the main character has decided to deal with his urgent matters. Events move to the Huigong shopping center, where the collector's office is located. It seems that the boss was scolding his subordinates because of the events with Jiang Mingyun. The manager was unhappy that they not only did not collect the debt, but also got the boy out of it. The boss ordered to quickly tell everything in detail. The collector with a broken arm said that at first his partner Wan beat up what seemed to be a weak young man, but then he rose to his feet and suddenly became much stronger. After a brawl with a professional fighter, Jiang Mingyong broke the man's arm. The boss couldn't believe that Huang Shixiang, who had been fighting in the arena for many years, could knock out some small guy with one blow. The collector was sure that their opponent only pretended to be weak, but in fact was a player. The manager was surprised to hear such assumptions about the guy. He asked his employee Jay if it really was possible that the young man was a real player. Jay replied that he could confirm this when he entered into battle with this guy, but from what he heard, he concluded that the young man could be a recently awakened player. Another employee joined the conversation and said that some kid had come to the boss and wanted to talk about the Bai family's debt. The boss was surprised by such a sudden visit. Meng Fei couldn't believe that our hero could dare to come to his office, so he ordered him to be quickly brought to his office. He was dissatisfied that the collectors not only did not collect the debt, but also brought their tail with them. The boss said that he would punish his employees later, but for now they should disappear from his eyes. Another of Meng Fei's subordinates reported that he brought Jiang Mingyong. The boss and Jay looked at the main character with curiosity. The guy said hello and hesitantly asked who the boss named Meng Fei was. The chief explained that it was him and asked whether the young man had really beaten his men. The protagonist sincerely apologized for being emotional and beating up the two senior men this afternoon, and hoped that Boss Feng would not take it to heart. Meng Fei thought that the guy was fooling around again. He mentally noted that the main character looked a lot like a suffocated one. The boss smiled and pretended to have forgotten the unpleasant situation with his employees. He believed that his people had simply done a bad job, and he understood that the guy had come to him for more than just an apology. Jiang Mingyong explained that he came here about the Bai family's debt, and wanted the boss to give him some time to pay it off. Meng Fei noted that this would be difficult to do, but agreed to the agreement on one condition. The main character was delighted by the boss's kindness and asked what the condition would be. Jay began to smile when the boss spoke for the condition. Meng Fei was willing to extend the time to repay the debt if the guy defeated his employee. Jiang Mingyong felt that this was not a good enough method and wanted to use a less violent method. The boss questioned him because our hero used language about less violence. Meng Fei recalled that he beat the employees, and now the man must repay the guy for this. Moreover, Jiang Mingyong was in no position to choose, otherwise he must bring the money right now. The main character clenched his fists and noted that he understood everything. He asked again if after defeating the assistant boss, the time to repay the debt would really be extended. Meng Fei laughed and confirmed his intentions, so if the guy can defeat Jay, then they continue the conversation. The boss warned Jiang Mingyong that Jay was a real player. Meng Fei's employee noted that our hero had a sharp gaze, but he still believed that Jiang Mingyong was a failure, but he rushed into battle. The guy immediately realized that his opponent was very fast, so he decided to block his attack. Suddenly Jay found himself behind the main character and sarcastically asked where he was looking. Jiang Mingyong did not notice such a lightning-fast maneuver, so he did not understand how his opponent could get behind him. In the end, Jay landed a clean kick to the guy's face. Our hero did not have time to react to such an incredible speed, so he lost his balance and flew to the side. He realized that he had failed to face the speed-type player. Jay, without waiting, continued to strike with lightning speed and asked the guy not to be distracted from the brawl. The opponent mockingly asked if the main character really couldn't resist his speed and suggested fighting slower to give our hero a head start. But Jay finally decided not to stop and continue to beat Jiang Mingyong until he lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Meng Fei was thinking that the guy was really so weak, but he didn't understand why he was able to defeat Lao Huan then. The fighter could not believe that such a weakling could knock out Huang with one blow, and noted that at this rate, Jiang Mingyun would not see the extension of the debt terms. In the end, he was still more inclined to believe that the guy was a new player who had recently received his powers. The main character realized that this was a bad sign, that people began to guess about his powers. From the fearful expression on his opponent's face, Jay knew his guess was correct. As a senior player, he decided to teach Jiang Mingyun a lesson. The fighter sent advice, which was that the enemy should not find out your true strength, and continued the fight. The main character shouted boldly and gathered all his strength to confront his opponent. He smiled and thought of using the bottle of water he brought with him. Jiang Mingyong swung his hand and threw the bottle towards Jay. The fighter did not understand what was flying in his direction and grabbed the object in the air. Looking at the thing in his hand, he realized that it was only a bottle of water. Jay thought the guy was so desperate that he thought the bottle would make a difference. Suddenly the water rushed in front of his face. Everything around was in a curtain of smoke, and the bloodied Jay could not understand what had happened. Jiang Mingyong was pleased with his plan and laughed quietly. Meng Fei couldn't believe that the guy was a magician and was able to tear off the bottle using fire magic. Jay noticed that his hand had been burned by the explosion and was now completely incapacitated. This angered the fighter, so he was ready to kill the main character. Boss Fei couldn't understand how the protagonist became so dexterous so quickly. Of course, he warned his comrade to be careful, but there was no point in warning, because Jiang Mingyun's kula flew from behind the smoke straight into Jay's face. In the end, the protagonist's opponent managed to dodge the blow that could have been his last. Badly injured, Jay was barely able to break and stop. The fighter asked the guy what class he belonged to. Jiang Mingyong recalled that a few seconds ago, the senior player gave advice that there was no need to tell anyone about your real skills. Jay was annoyed by such simple tricks from the main character and the fact that they were able to defeat him. The guy again used a water bottle in battle, and his opponent was already prepared for such a development of events. The torn bottle rolled towards Man Fei's feet and he picked it up. The man noticed that there was something inside it, namely metal. At this moment, he realized that Jiang Mingyong had tricked them and was not actually any kind of magician. Meanwhile, an enraged Jay decided to show off his instant movement skill. Our hero realized that his opponent was using this a second time to get behind him again. Even more bottles of explosive water rained down on Jay, which he didn't like very much. Jiang Mingyong crouched down and covered his ears so as not to be harmed by the explosions, and at that moment his opponent was burned in the fire. Jay tried to recover from such a sudden and strong attack, and the main character also decided to teach him a lesson. The guy's advice was that you should never underestimate your opponent, no matter how weak he may seem. After Jiang Mingyong's final blow, his opponent was lying unconscious on the floor. At this moment, the Abyss system notified the guy that he had received 40 AW points and moved to the 3rd level. Meng Fei was shocked that one of his best fighters was defeated by this little guy. Jiang Mingyun called the boss, but he was dumbfounded by the fight he saw and Jay's loss. The main character, with a smile on his lips, asked if he was qualified enough. An ominous aura formed around him, and he invited Fairy to sit down and talk about extending the debt repayment period. The loser Jay continued to lie on the floor unconscious. Meng Fei silently took a step towards the main character. In the end, he broke the silence with applause and praised Jiang Mingyong for his brilliant victory. The boss admitted that this battle was lost by his side, but the show seemed wonderful. Such praise embarrassed our hero, so he explained that he was only a little luckier than his opponent. Meng Fei noted that the guy did not need to be ashamed of his achievements. He said that he noticed the trick that Jiang Mingyong used against his employee. The boss wanted to know more information about this trick. Meng Fei asked our hero what kind of metal was inside the bottle and how they were able to explode. Jiang Mingyong explained that it was ordinary sodium metal. The husband was surprised to hear the name of a chemical element that was unfamiliar to him. The main character noted that every schoolchild knows that sodium reacts strongly and explodes upon contact with water. On the way to the office, he grabbed 6 bottles of water from a nearby store. Meng Fei noticed that he did not see how the guy put metal into the bottle when he threw them, that is, he should have put sodium in ahead of time, but then the reaction happened instantly. The young man explained that for safety it was enough to pour out some of the water. He then secured the metal to the lid with double-sided tape and thus prevented the reaction. Despite the fact that there were not enough reagents, it was still enough to surprise the enemy and disorient him. After such detailed explanations, Meng Fei understood everything. Still, he still asked ere the guy was able to get metallic sodium, because it can hardly be bought in a store, but Jiang Mingyong believed that too many questions had already been asked. The main character noted that apparently the boss had memory problems, because his office was located in the chemical market. Then Meng Fei realized that the young man was not stupid and had planned this from the very beginning. The man noted that the young man really helped him broaden his horizons. Jiang Mingyong was the kind of person who could really surprise the boss. The initial one then realized that the main character acted like a weakling at first and was passive in battle so that the opponent would lose his guard. In his thoughts, the guy thought that in fact this was not on purpose, but simply the effect of the loser's aura skills. Meng Fei experienced that if Jay had not been fooled by the young man's tricks, he would have won with his fighting abilities. The man concluded that the guy only looked like he had come for peace negotiations, but in fact was completely ready for battle. Jiang Mingyong really wanted to resolve everything peacefully and without violence. But the young man was not so naive as to come to the office empty-handed, without any preparation, realizing that he would not be allowed in after being beaten by the collectors. Boss Fei was annoyed that Jiang Mingyong was so smart and cunning at such a young age. Finally, the boss admitted that our hero was very smart, so Meng Fei wanted to see how far the young man would get in the world of players. The guy decided to remind him that from the very beginning it was about debt. The boss sat down on the chair and assured that he always keeps his word. Meng Fei finally proposed extending the debt repayment period. It seems that the man's conditions did not satisfy our hero. He screamed at the entire office. The guy was outraged and could not understand how he was going to find 5 million in 3 days. The boss was annoyed by Jiang Mingyong's screams, because his ears were blocked. He did not want to make any concessions, because the young man was a player and could earn it after several trips to the dungeons. The main character explained that his awakening happened quite recently and he still had not passed the test to qualify as a player, let alone join any guild. Meng Fei believed that it was definitely not his problem and told the young man that there would be a player evaluation on Monday, which was a good opportunity. He placed his own business card in front of Jiang Mingyun and asked him to contact him when the debtor received a sufficient amount of money. In addition, Boss Men's company was collecting information, so he was ready to help the main character if necessary. Meng Fei finally let go of the young man and watched him leave the window of his office. The collector asked if the boss would really let this guy leave easily, but the boss was confident that Jiang Mingyong would give the money on time, because the man had seen some incredible things in a short period of time. Finally, the main character returned home and notified his family about it. Aunt carefully asked him to wash his hands and start eating. Taozi said that today, when her mother was not at home, debt collectors came to them, but Jiang Mingyong drove them away. The woman was furious with her husband by Xianyong and assured our hero that he did not have to worry about this and that she herself would find the money to pay off the debt. The guy noted that the amount was rather large, so the office would hardly leave the family alone if the debt was not repaid. When they heard the amount of 5 million, the daughter and mother were incredibly shocked. Jiang Mingyong reassured them, because he had already talked to the collectors, and with the help of the player status, he was going to quickly earn this money. The aunt rejected the guy's offer and slammed her hand on the table. She categorically did not want to allow her nephew to become a player. The woman said that the main character's parents disappeared after they became players. The guy was surprised to hear this story. He had previously been told that his mother and father died in an accident. Jiang Mingyong looked at his aunt, who still had not said a word, with a question in his eyes. In the end, the woman noted with a sigh that the guy had such an uncontrollable character since childhood. She said that the boy's parents were actually players, and this happened 20 years ago, when Jiang Mingyun was only a year old. They came to their aunt and asked her to look after the baby while they went on a long journey. Even then, the woman knew that the authorities had chosen them to join the massive raid. The parents left and never returned until a year later, when the state inspectorate for players came to the ants' house and notified them that they were missing. All this time, the woman did not want to talk about it because she was afraid that Jiang Mingyong would not follow his mother and father. The ant begged that the main character not become a player, and promised to solve the money issue on her own. In the end, deep night came and our hero finally went to rest. His sleep was not restful, so he kept returning from side to side. In the end, Jiang Mingyong couldn't stand it anymore, jumped out of bed and screamed, because he couldn't sleep at all. The guy could not believe that his parents were players, and he understood that his aunt would have kept it a secret if he himself had not wanted to join the players. According to the woman, after their disappearance she turned to the authorities, but she was unable to find out anything. Even the guild did not leave any traces behind, as if it had never existed. Jiang Mingyong wanted to know what happened to his parents during the raid, that they went into hiding for 20 years, and suspected that they might have died. The main character remembered all the ridicule and insults that he heard in his direction as an orphan. He tried to dispel his obsessive thoughts about his difficult childhood. The guy fell exhausted on the bed and thought about what to do next. Suddenly he remembered the business card that Meng Fei gave him. The boss's phone was lying on the bedside table when he received an incoming call. He picked up the phone and asked who was on the other end. Jiang Mingyong apologized for disturbing Meng Fei and explained that it was he who called. The young man remembered that Men's company was collecting information, so he asked to look for information about 2 players who disappeared 20 years ago. The boss explained that it would be 200,000 yuan, but if they didn't find anything, they would return half. Jiang Mingyong and Meng Fei agreed and ended the conversation. Our hero is tired because everything comes down to money again. He apologized to his aunt for not listening to her this time, because he had definitely decided that he wanted to become a player. Meanwhile, in an unfamiliar room, where the boss called to his other employee, his subordinate did not like the boss calling so late because he wanted to sleep. The boss raised his voice and reminded employee and Mungrong that the quarterly evaluation of new players would begin very soon. He ordered him to open his eyes wider and definitely find the player, otherwise he would bury in Monrong underground. The guy assured that this time he would recruit someone strong. Events moved to Monday morning at the players' center. There were many people there who were selling high-ranking magic crystals and who were solving relationships among themselves. The main character noted that there were more people at the inspection than at any fair. Jiang Mingyong looked around and thought that he needed to find someone who knew where the new player registration center was located. He walked up to the nearest guy and asked about the location of the office. It turned out that it was in Monrong himself, who was looking for new players for his boss. It seems that he wanted to say some kind of insult towards our hero. Jiang Mingyong was scared and already thought that he had chosen the wrong person to ask for directions. Suddenly An Mungrong patted Jiang Mingyong on the shoulder and said that he was a genius, which is why our hero did not understand anything at all. In fact, the stranger said that he dressed simply today, so he thought that no one would notice his beauty, and therefore noted the genius of the protagonist. Jiang Mingyong recalled that he asked for the registration office for new players. Then his interlocutor realized that the main character came here because he was new and wanted to get a grade. He explained that the registration of new players took place at the side entrance, and on the other side there was a check for old ones, and recommended that Jiang Mingyun find an employee to fill out the entry form. The main character thanked the handsome man and ran in the direction he needed. And Mungrong wished him good luck and believed that our hero would definitely become a player. The handsome guy thought that Jiang Mingyong looked rather weak, so he thought that this time there were only losers gathered here. At that moment, an unfamiliar car quickly drove up to him. Zhang Miao, whom the main character had not met in the best way, got out of the car and asked An Mungrong if he was the vice leader of the Hu Ben Guild. It seems that this vain magician also had a tense relationship with the handsome guy, because they were always making sarcastic jokes at each other. Zhang Miao noted that An Mungrong needed to take care of his guild, which would collapse very soon, and offered to go to him in Shangjin. The guy didn't consider the Major's guild to be so good, because such a scumbag as Zhang Miao was in it. Suddenly, someone approached them and ordered them to stop, and the guys felt the pressure of an S-rank player. The man noted that they were public figures, and if they started fighting, they would disgrace themselves. It was Shui Hongche, the head of the Wind and Thunder Guild, an S-rank warrior, and he noted that everyone around them wants to have talented people in their guild, so there is definitely no need to fight for it. Meanwhile, Jiang Mingyong successfully registered, acquired the warrior class, and received his numbered badge, which he had to attach to his chest. The employee asked him to go through the door, after which he would be at the test site. The guy stood in front of the final door with slight trepidation in his soul. Jiang Mingyong clenched his fists and prepared to join the real world of players. Suddenly, the Abyss system sent a new message to the main character. She informed us that the guy had not received all points for a long time, so the system had to issue a random punishment, which consisted in the fact that our hero was deducted 50 luck points. The main character was completely dissatisfied with the stupid system. Using loudspeakers, the organizers announced that the evaluation of newcomers would begin soon and asked everyone to enter the arena. Jiang Mingyong realized that he was late and tried to calm himself down, because now he could only hope for the best. While he was entering the arena, the guy was thinking that even if his luck had decreased by 50 points, he still didn't know how much it was initially, so maybe this was not a terrible loss at all. Fear has big eyes, so maybe the situation wasn't dire. Our hero confidently entered the arena, but it seems that the punishment began to take effect, so he awkwardly stumbled because of a stone. In addition, Jiang Mingyun fell with his forehead on a stone while accelerating. The other players looked at the poor fellow and asked if he was okay. The guy assured that everything was fine and thought that the decision to distribute 20 points to strength was not bad, otherwise he would have been the weakest player in the entire history. But still he realized that his situation was much worse than he had previously thought. One of the players said that the assessment will begin soon, so the main character needs to get up quickly. The strangers began to discuss who could become the chief examiner, and hoped that it would not be Hai Li. Jiang Mingyong interrupted their conversation and the guys immediately paid attention to him. Our hero asked who Hai Li was and why there might be problems with her. One of the players was surprised that the guy came to the assessment knowing almost nothing, but agreed to explain everything. In the player center of their city, there were 3 senior S-rank magician examiners, and the first of them was the silent wizard Mo1. The second examiner was healer Huang Lin, and the last was a charming queen named Hai Li, and the examiners carried out the assessment, distributing it among themselves in the morning, lunch and evening. Although this is a test for the players, it is just a job, so the first 2 examiners do everything without tricks, but Hai Li was completely different. As it turned out, this examiner was a pervert. Jiang Mingyong was ashamed of what he heard, because he thought that the woman was beating people with a whip, and his interlocutors saw the guy's strange excitement. The players confirmed the young man's guesses, but the most disgusting thing was that the woman was very strict, so the assessment with her can be called real torture. Typically, with 50 participants, examiners eliminate 10 people per round, but in the case of Hai Li, only 10 people go through the round itself. The second player said that the main character need not worry, because the man himself also had Hai Li in the previous season. At this moment, Jiang Mingyong realized that this was the end of him, and the player thought he was stupid, because the likelihood that he would meet a sadist was the same as in the previous year. But with the current luck of the main character, they won't get Hai Li only if the guy is cursed. The first number asked when the assessment would begin, because the senior examiner had not yet arrived. The rest of the players also noticed that the evaluation was already delayed by 10 minutes, so they were outraged. The employee became nervous because of the indignation of the participants and asked to wait a little before starting. Finally, a gorgeous woman approached, touched that the players were waiting so impatiently for her. Let Li sit on the roof of the stadium and then jump down to her charges to begin the evaluation process. All the people below noticed some shadow in the sky and became interested in what it was. The examiner landed with such force that pieces of earth flew in different directions. The players had to defend themselves with their hands, otherwise they would get stones in the face. Pieces of earth also flew at the assistant, but she did not pretend. Meanwhile, Hai Li emerged from the smoke and ashes and greeted her players, the players. The woman, holding a whip, asked if they were ready to teach her with love. Jiang Mingyun's partner did not understand why he had done so wrong that he received Hai Li in the assessment for the second time. The main character was embarrassed, because his comrade was not to blame for anything, because the only fault was the guy himself. Jiang Mingyun's other partner was sure that there was nothing to be afraid of this Hai Li, because in any situation, the player must give his all to the cause. It turned out that he had already had a nosebleed due to the beauty of the examiner, and this explained his mood and desire to give his all. Events are transferred to the third auditorium of the center building. Zhang Miao was sitting there, talking about how this poor group was doomed with Hai Li, and Manrong noted that participant number 1 had a good aura, and the major only then noticed that his enemy was in the same room with him. Participant number 1 had the name Tokugawa and was from the city of Tokchan. He studied Japanese Bushido since childhood. His strength is assessed by rank, so there was an active fight for him in the audience. Zhang Miao was tired of empty talk, so he offered to argue. The major had with him a 2-kilogram spiritual stone worth 200,000, which he had to give to number 1 as a gift for passing the assessment, but if the player failed, then the jewel would go to an Mungrong. If the handsome guy loses, he must bark like a dog. The guild members entered into an agreement among themselves, and meanwhile the main character was preparing for the assessment. Let Li explain the rules of the challenge, which was that the examiner would now attack the players non-stop for 30 minutes using magic. Players had the choice to dodge, defend, heal, or go for it, and they had to survive the allotted time to advance to the next round. Once a player falls unconscious or leaves the arena, he will be considered eliminated. Meanwhile, the assistant put on high-tech glasses that helped carry out the tests. The girl immediately activated her perception of space. The arena field around her began to transform amazingly. The players watched with surprise and interest the changes around them. Jiang Mingyong noted that he just felt something pass through him, but his partner explained that this was only a spell that was used to monitor the movements of the players present in the arena and save them in case of unforeseen situations. In the end, Hai Li prepared herself and was ready to begin the first round. The woman sent a stream of her powerful magic straight into the sky. Some who watched the arena from afar thought it was such a huge fireworks display. Number 42 warned Jiang Mingyong to prepare for battle and remember to dodge. Numerous streams of the examiner's magic began to fall from the sky into the arena, which immediately began to catch up with their first victims. Number 38 decided to use the fast step technique to dodge attacks faster. He was happy because this task was a piece of cake for him. Meanwhile, someone else used natural magic and summoned a stone wall using an earth technique. The structure suddenly appeared right next to number 38, so he was a little scared. It turned out that it was Jiang Mingyong's partner, and the other player was unhappy that the man was using magic when he should be a tank. Number 42 noted that there is no need to judge a book by its cover, because this year he was already 30 and became a magician, and besides, he invited other players to hide behind his wall in order to survive the first round. The main character, meanwhile, was running away from the explosions and thanked his comrade for such help. Jiang Mingyong noticed that the strength stat not only made attacks stronger, but also increased the power of the dash. He just needed to concentrate the energy in his leg and use the force. In the end, the guy was able to jump to the right place. At that moment, he was warned by a shout that a stream of magic was flying behind him. The concentrated energy slammed into Jiang Mingyong's back with such force that the poor fellow actually clicked his teeth. Everyone hoped that he would not die after a direct hit. They saw that our hero was alive, but for some reason he was crying. Finally, Jiang Mingyong found himself behind the stone and even then understood all the suffering and hardships of the elders. He realized that this was not just a test, but a real battlefield. The sphere continued to spin above the arena and shoot fireworks of magic in different directions. Jiang Mingyong asked his comrades if there shouldn't just be a tool that evaluates players. The guy imagined that there should be a special magical sphere that distributes rank among people. Number 42 thought that the main character had reread the manga and was a fan. Jiang Mingyong refuted such guesses from his comrade and noted that with a certain device, the assessment would be much easier and faster. A man wanted to ask our hero a specific question about the player classes. There were warriors, rangers and magicians, and for all of them it was necessary to select the main characteristic to assess the strength of each player individually. The guy couldn't understand. He thought that the rank of the awakening stone determines the level. Number 38 noted that such an assessment is rather superficial, and the test shows real combat abilities. Another player agreed that they could really show off their fighting capabilities. They believed that the awakening stone was more of a tool and equipment. The higher its quality, the better the weapon. Therefore, if a beginner cannot find the monster's weak points or even hit it, he will not be able to inflict damage corresponding to the level of the stone. Or the player will not be able to position himself and have a good perception of the environment. Even with the best protective equipment, sooner or later he may die in a randomly changing dungeon. Because of all these factors, players are judged on their fighting ability and survival skills because these two things determined the player's true strength. Number 42 explained that if the evaluation was done using crystals, most people would pass it and they would only be cannon fodder, and that was when Jiang Mingyong understood the meaning of these tests. The man noted that in every country they approached the assessment of players responsibly, but it was Hai Li who was too strict. Number 38 noted that now was not the time to communicate about this, since it seemed that their protective rock was starting to fall apart. The 30-year-old mage noted that last time he passed the first round with ease using this spell. He assured that he was a master in protective spells, and number 38 decided to look out and see what was happening behind the rock. The guy asked if the magician was absolutely sure that the stone could withstand such strong fire power. Number 42 guaranteed that there was no reason to worry and guessed that the guy had never been to the Hai Li trials. He wanted to say that such firepower was quite normal, but he was surprised when he saw what was happening behind the stone wall. Dozens of bright rays of magic flew towards our heroes. A rain of shells crashed into the rock and no one could understand where such firepower came from. The assistant informed Hai Li that she had sent a third of the power to the 12 o'clock direction and asked uncertainly whether the examiner was allowed to do so. Suddenly the woman replied that she had nothing to do with it. She never once controlled the direction of the fireballs, they fly there themselves, as if something were pulling them there. Number 38 also did not understand why such firepower was directed at them, and considered it abnormal. Number 42 noticed that bullets were flying at them as if they were boss monsters and thought that one of his comrades had offended the examiner. While the partners were quarreling, the main culprit was sure that this was happening precisely because of him, and he understood that the stupid system was not going to let him go just like that. Eventually, the rain of bullets damaged the rock and it began to fall apart. The main character and his comrades looked in shock at their possible defeat. In the end, they realized that they had to run away urgently, otherwise they would have been stoned. Jiang Mingyong grabbed his dumbfounded comrade to save him from death. He asked if number 38 was okay, because any longer and the player would not have been saved. 38th was bleeding from his broken head, so he asked Jiang Mingyong not to help him anymore, because even from the stones he would get less harm. He reminded that security had not passed, so you should not stand still and quickly run away. The guys returned to the noise from their friend, and he irritably asked why they continued to stand. Only then did Jiang Mingyong see what trouble they urgently needed to escape from. Number 38 thought that this was only happening because he was staring at the examiner's chest. The main character mustered up the courage to admit to his comrades that all the bullets were flying after him. The partner asked what the guy had done and was now receiving such a punishment. Jiang Mingyong did not have time to explain the situation, so he decided to take the bullets away from his comrades on his own. Number 42 said that there were still about 10 minutes left and asked if the guy was going to run away from the balls all this time. The guy confirmed his intentions and asked the magician to strengthen him, because Jiang Mingyun's speed was not bad, but his bone flexibility was not enough. The comrade agreed to help our hero, but warned that the effect would not last long. With the help of his magic wand, number 42 used amplification magic. He applied an all-out stat enhancement to Jiang Mingyong. Instantly, the main character concentrated energy in his legs and prepared to run away from the bullets. He asked everyone to disperse and made a powerful jump up. Jiang Mingyun received a message from the system that he could send magic balls to others and thereby gain awe points. The guy believed that this was still an easy way to get awe points, reduce the number of balls in the arena and eliminate some participants. He didn't know what the second test would be, but according to his comrade, only 10 people would pass the first, so knocking out the other players would improve the situation for Jiang Mingyong. But our hero understood that, using such dirty tricks, he could not become a real player. Meanwhile, girl number 48's magical powers were already on the verge, so her shield would not last long. Suddenly she noticed that she was flying a projectile that was not like the others. It looked denser and longer, so the girl suspected something. Number 48 realized that if this ball hits him, it will definitely be the end for him. Jiang Mingyong, who was running away from the attacks, pushed her away to run further. He flew in front of the girl at incredible speed. Number 48 asked why the guy was running around at breakneck speed and almost knocked her down. The girl didn't have time to finish speaking when she noticed that Jiang Mingyong had taken the projectile away from her and helped. Further on in the arena, more screams were heard that the guy was running carelessly and doing incomprehensible stupid things. Number 6 noticed that the main character had distracted all the magic balls. The girl number 11 did not feel Jiang Mingyun's mana and did not understand why the guy was trying to help all the players, because he could instantly fall out of the assessment. The magician girl invited all participants to support their savior. She noted that they couldn't rely on the weakest player to pass the test. All participants agreed with the girl, because they could not just look at their savior and not help in any way. One of the magicians used increased magical resistance and magical protection. Another participant used magic to enhance the initial degree, increasing dexterity. Jiang Mingyong noticed that all of his stats had increased because someone had used magic to do so. The guy couldn't understand why the system gave him 10 awe points, even though he didn't lure bullets to others. It turned out that the points were given out because the participants were carried away by his actions, and he thought that his punishment was not so bad. The main character decided that to improve the effect, he needed to attract even more balls. Jiang Mingyong received dozens of awe points and rapidly increased his level, while player No. 1 was killing people in cold blood. The killer paid no attention to the cries of his victims and explained to the participants who noticed his crime that he only cut off people's arms and legs, but did not kill them. He concluded from the expressions on the players' faces that they were not at all prepared for the assessment, because the second test consisted precisely in the fact that they needed to knock out as many participants as possible and get points for it. One of the players noted that even if you need to knock people out of the competition, you can simply make them unconscious or take them out of the arena, and not ruin their lives. Number 1 believed that the world didn't need so many players and weaklings, and they were just stepping stones for this cold-blooded killer. He decided that the interlocutor would become his 7th victim. Suddenly Number 1 dealt a deft blow to the participant. He needed to eliminate 3 more players and the guy was wondering who would be his next victim. Number 3 fell under the hot hand of the killer and the guy begged at the first not touch him, and wanted to surrender on his own. Number 1 said there was no need for any extra hassle. The player emotionlessly cut 3 numbers in half. The next victim was a frightened girl who begged the guy not to kill her. Number 1 had already gotten the hang of it and couldn't stop, so he swung at the poor participant. Suddenly one of the players called the bastard, so he was distracted from the girl. Before Number 1 had time to see this brave man, a strong blow from the main character landed in his face and he quickly flew away to the side. The killer was angry that someone dared to attack him on the sly, and he also noticed that the attacker had no magical power. Jiang Mingyong couldn't believe that such a bastard could talk about a fair fight, and noted that his blow was just an appetizer. The main course for issue 1 in the form of all the magic balls was on its way, but the killer did not understand what was being said. The main character spoke of punishment from heaven for the scum. Only then did Number 1 notice that dozens of magical projectiles were flying towards him. In the end, the bullets reached their target and the vile killer found himself among the hot streams of fire. Everyone around did not understand whether Jiang Mingyong had really diverted all the magic balls and directed them towards someone else. The players realized that participant Number 1 was eliminating others and cutting off their arms and legs, and the main character was trying to stop him. Jiang Mingyun's comrade hoped that with such firepower, the sneaky player should have been eliminated from the competition. The main character was somewhat suspicious, because he was not given any awe points, so he thought that Number 1 did not experience emotions at all. Then the guy realized that, most likely, the player could not have suffered any harm. And indeed, Number 1 was conscious and wanted to counterattack our hero. The guy was saved by the fact that the assistant informed him that the time had run out and the test was completed. In the end, Jiang Mingyong was able to evade his opponent's attack. The blade of the sword stopped right in front of the protagonist's neck. Number 1 noted that the guy was quite lucky, but promised to turn Jiang Mingyun into mincemeat in the next round. The main character wanted to get rid of this garbage, but now he has become his main goal. Still, he achieved some success and received 16 stat points for increasing his level, but he understood that his opponent was very nimble, and our hero had no combat skills at all. A comrade recommended that Jiang Mingyun give up, because being targeted by a B rank was no fun at all. The main character understood this perfectly well, but had reasons not to retreat. The magician noted that the guy was very stubborn and weak among everyone, but had a flexible mind. The husband believed that this same fate had brought them together here, so he decided to give his friend a skill stone, which contained the initial skills for each of the classes. Jiang Mingyun only needed to hold the crystal in his hands and feel it with his heart to obtain the skill for his class. Suddenly a message came from the system, which indicated that our hero had received all 3 skills for 3 classes, but the man only a few seconds ago said that this was impossible. It turned out that the void system did not have any class restrictions, so Jiang Mingyong could learn any ability. The message said that the guy managed to learn the golden body defense skill, but exploding ball and absolute precision were impossible to learn due to lack of intelligence and dexterity points. He was happy because he still had not distributed the free stat points and could quickly correct the situation. In the end, the skill redistribution system was as Jiang Mingyong asked, and the guy was finally able to learn new skills, so he was now confident that he would defeat his enemy. Meanwhile, Hai Li talked about the rules of round 2, which were that the players had to eliminate each other and would receive 1 point per participant for this. Rank B required 10 points, C was 7, Rank D required 3 and E required 0, but the main requirement was that no one should die. Meanwhile, number 1 could not come to terms and called for the main character. He called him to the battlefield so that the guy could finally accept his fate. Other players considered number 1 an evil scumbag who established himself at the expense of weak players. Everyone around the girl who was saved by Jiang Mingyun believed that the guy did not need to go against the psycho and withdraw from the exam for the sake of safety. Our hero sarcastically asked if someone had secured the chain poorly, which the dog ran and broke here. Jiang Mingyong called his enemy a purebred dog, which made him very angry. The players were surprised, because the guy was not afraid and still went out to fight the rabid B-rank fighter. The main character asked number 1 to be a good dog, because he was disturbing the other participants with his barking. His comrades thought that he was looking for death, because he continued to provoke and drain the already furious player. Number 1 was glad that Jiang Mingyong did not give up, because then he would have to look for the same weakling for the next step. Before the bastard could finish his sentence, a bright magic ball flew into his face from, in his words, a complete loser. The main character was delighted with such accuracy, but the absolute accuracy effect, unfortunately, only worked once. This unexpected move made number 1 incredibly angry. He rushed towards Jiang Mingyong to finally kill the overly brave guy. Our hero was waiting for just this and immediately used the double explosive ball spell. The magic missiles instantly flew towards number 1. Number 38 noted that the guy launches explosive balls like a machine gun, so he has every chance of winning. A comrade said that you can't make plans in advance, because the question is whether the shells will keep up with a physically prepared enemy. If you look closely, you can see that number 1 has dodged all attacks except the first surprise shot, and continues to get closer to Jiang Mingyun. Meanwhile, the fighter felt confident and considered the guy a fool. He was annoyed that the main character was able to go against him using pathetic tricks. Jiang Mingyong continuously released balls from his left hand to stop number 1's progress. From the right hand, projectiles were released only after some time, but were aimed directly at the opponent. But number 1 still considered Jiang Mingyong the stupidest person he had ever met, because the guy blocked his inspection by raising dust with his shots. Number 1 could easily determine the location of our hero by the direction of the balls. The player had already gotten close enough and prepared to strike Jiang Mingyun. He swung his katana confidently, but ended up striking into space. Suddenly the main character appeared on the other side and asked who he wanted to cut down there. Jiang Mingyong noted that there was no need to underestimate his capabilities and shot no 1 directly in the face. This was the second time the guy dealt a devastating blow to his enemy. From the blow, the player flew headlong over himself, but eventually regrouped and was able to get to his feet. Number 1 was angry because the lack of magical powers prevented him from tracking the main character, and he realized that Jiang Mingyun's shots were just a decoy. The player considered this meanness, because now, due to burns, his right eye was not functioning. The main character did not expect that using the skills would be so exhausting, but it still went according to plan. Jiang Mingyong was now preparing for the final blow. The wisdom he told his opponent was that the best hunter is often in the form of the prey. Number 38 saw Jiang Mingyong's stance and suspected what the guy wanted to do. the main character mustered up the courage to engage in close combat. Number 1 admitted that he really underestimated the guy, but believed that a simple magician would not be able to engage him in close combat. The player was ready to cut Jiang Mingyong with his eyes closed. Without saying a word, our hero did not wait and charged his opponent right in the face with all his might. After all, the guy was using golden body defense and wanted to finish his attack by using absolute precision and explosive fist at full power. With the last of his strength, Jiang Mingyong took the final step of his plan. He stood and waited to see the results of his skills and abilities. In the end, number 1 was still conscious, so he was able to clear his throat and shoot the image in the direction of our hero. The guy's friend was shocked that his opponent did not lose consciousness after such a strong blow. The trash was unhappy because Jiang Mingyong kept flirting with him again and again. He angrily shouted for the main character to come to him and asked what the young man was counting on with such a weak blow. Meanwhile, the assistant announced that player 1 was out, so the winner had already been chosen. He thought that the warden had gone completely blind, because he was still standing, so the girl had no right to deduct points. Jiang Mingyong noted with a smile on his lips that the only one who has vision problems is number 1 himself. The young man added that his opponent was still stupid because he did not notice where his foot was. Then number 1 finally looked down and saw what was outside the arena. The guy's friend also noticed that the player had crossed the border. Number 48 was surprised to understand how Jiang Mingyong decided to defeat his opponent. Then number 1 realized that his opponent had damaged his right eye only to disrupt his perception of his surroundings and take him as far as possible to the edge, and then knock him out of the arena with one blow. Jiang Mingyong asked whether his opponent now understood the reason for his defeat, which was that the guy made him emotional from the very beginning, so that he could then end the fight with one blow. He said goodbye to his opponent, calling him a stepping stone for advancement, and advised him to think before he acts next time. 42 was incredibly happy about his young comrade and could not believe that he was still able to win. All the players who watched this fight admired the victory of the protagonist, although it was not entirely fair. At the same time, An Mungrong in the audience was also pleased that number 1 lost, because now the spiritual crystal belonged to him. He thought that it would be a little presumptuous of him, but Zhang Miao still has a lot of money, so it shouldn't be a problem for him. The major was very annoyed, so he ordered the guy to take his reward and hide from his eyes. Zhang Miao was angry that he himself recommended Tokugawa to his leader, but he was more worried that player number 50 looked very familiar and eventually realized that he had seen this guy a few days ago in the dungeon. Meanwhile, Jiang Mingyong received incredible pleasure from receiving dozens of awe points for his successful battle. Eventually, he was able to reach level 10 of the Abyss system and realized that his efforts to appear holy in front of the crowd were not in vain. In addition, the guy received a promotion bonus and hoped that it would be something better than the aura of a weakling. The comrades watched as Jiang Mingyong bowed down in front of the system so that it would no longer bully him, and thought that this was a rather strange victory pose. After his little ritual, the main character ordered the system to receive the reward. He eventually gained the spiritual shock skill, which allowed the player to release a void aura once every 24 hours and frighten one target, but it only lasted for 2 seconds. Jiang Mingyun didn't like it a bit, but it was still better than a passive skill, and he thought about bowing a few times next time so that maybe something else would come up. Number 1 was furious that our hero behaved like a real winner. Tokugawa, with trembling hands, noticed that only his cheap tricks helped the guy. In the end, the madman could not stand it and took off to attack his sworn enemy. The examiner understood that such a development of events was not at all in her favor. The comrade tried to warn Jiang Mingyong that his opponent was attacking him from behind. Tokugawa wanted to see what his opponent was really like. Jiang Mingyong calmly noted that he was much better than this sick trash. He decided to use the spiritual shock skill he had acquired a few minutes ago. Number 1 couldn't understand how the loser had the S-rank pressure if he had no magical abilities at all. The main character recalled that Tokugawa simply cut off the arms and legs of other players. Jiang Mingyong took his opponent's hand to let him feel the pain that his victims endured. He grabbed the fighter's wrist tightly and used the explosive ball spell. Tokugawa screamed frantically, feeling a piercing pain, and wanted to kill the main character even more. The guy ordered him to shut up and accelerated to kick him. From such severe beatings, number 1 started bleeding from the mouth. In the end, Tokugawa flew away with incredible speed, dropping his weapon. Jiang Mingyong sarcastically asked what happened to his opponent that he couldn't even hold a sword in his hands. He jumped to catch up with his opponent because he was not going to finish the reprisal against him. The guy asked how he would do what he loved without a sword, which was to causelessly injure people. With the second kick, Jiang Mingyong broke Tokugawa's arm. The main character calmly ordered the scumbag to kneel. Suddenly, Tokugawa's soul-piercing scream rang through the arena. All of Jiang Mingyong's comrades were shocked and frightened by his cruel act. The guy realized that the killer was also screaming exactly the way his victims did. The main character noticed that by stabbing in the back, Tokugawa was definitely hoping for a kill, and meanwhile the system gave the player 100 AW points. Jiang Mingyong cast a spell and finally decided to finish off the sick trash. He was already accelerating for the final blow, but someone asked him to stop. Let Li stop his hand with a whip and note that this blow would definitely be fatal to Tokugawa, and after that Jiang Mingyong might have serious problems. The main character looked at the woman with anger in his eyes and asked if she really threatened him. The examiner noted that this place is under her jurisdiction, so she is the one who sets the rules here. Moreover, it was not Hailey who was the threat, but the Tokugawa family. The Scumbags family is a powerful family group covering all business and political circles in Japan, so they will definitely take revenge for the guy's death. Jiang Mingyong thanked the woman for her concern, but thought that by letting Tokugawa go, his problems would only increase. The examiner noted that in this case, at least the whole family would be hunting the guy. The comrades were unhappy and believed that this was a mockery of Jiang Mingyong. Other players then realized that the scum was only so impudent because of its origin, because now even Hailey defends him. Jiang Mingyong understood that spiritual shock was now on cooldown, so he would not be able to kill Tokugawa in front of the examiner. In the end, the guy admitted that the woman was right and his emotions got the better of his mind, so he told Hailey that he was not going to fight her. Then the examiner asked the team to enter one number and suggested continuing the assessment. Jiang Mingyong was grateful to Hailey for helping him avoid quite serious problems, and admitted that he was still quite weak for this world. If the guy gets stronger, even the Tokugawa dogs won't be able to bother him. Round 2 finally ended and players were asked to leave the arena and go to the office to receive a player license. Jiang Mingyong was happy about his first license, despite the fact that it was E rank, because it still allows you to join a guild and start earning big money. In 2 rounds, he received a lot of AW points, especially from Tokugawa, who brought in over 200 points at a time. The main character's level had increased to 12 and he still had 12 unallocated stat points, but he decided to save it for her just in case. Jiang Mingyong admitted that his fighting skills were at the C rank level and he was able to overcome Tokugawa only because he was lucky and his opponent underestimated his real strength. He understood that such scumbags do not abandon those who cross their path, but our hero has already revealed all his trump cards, so at the next meeting Tokugawa will be able to plan the murder of his enemy. Moreover, Jiang Mingyong should not forget that he receives punishment when he does not receive AW points. The guy was thinking that the guild's recruitment would begin next week, so he didn't understand where he could get the AW points, when someone put a hand on the young man's shoulder and asked why he was bored. It was number 42 named Qian Shan, showing that he also only had a D rank. Another comrade also noted that they all received licenses, so this should be celebrated. Jiang Mingyong immediately warned that he could not afford entertainment that cost more than 5 yuan, but his friends said that he could even make money. Meanwhile, Tokugawa had already come to his senses in his bed. His servant asked if the owner should be notified about what happened in the arena. The guy irritably threw his subordinate with a pillow and called him a fool. It was obvious that no one needed to know that Tokugawa had sullied the family's honor and lost to the weakest player. He calmed down a little and asked his assistant how long it would take to restore his body. The subordinate said that the healer's forecast is a week if the treatment is carried out daily. Tokugawa wanted to mobilize some Arung ninja, so he ordered an assistant to find one within a week. He wanted to know where Jiang Mingyong came from and the whole ins and outs in general. Meanwhile, the main character wanted to ask something from his new friends. He couldn't understand how they were going to celebrate in the wilderness. The comrade noted that there is no harm in dreaming, and asked whether Jiang Mingyong really thought that he was called for something like that. Qian Shan asked if our hero knew anything about the wild dungeons. The young man actually had no idea what he was talking about. In fact, some low-ranking dungeons were not under the control of the authorities due to the low content of spirit crystals, and therefore all players could form teams and enter them. The total price of spiritual crystals in such dungeons varied from 20 to 50,000 yuan, so Qian Shan once called one of his friends to become the head of the team, and they went to such caves every 2 days for a week. The comrade asked if Jiang Mingyong wanted to earn some money before the guild recruitment began. The main character was just thinking about where he could earn points, and here he could earn some money. Some shadow from behind a tree noticed that it was time for money. An unfamiliar girl came out from there and noted that she had been waiting for a team of comrades for a long time. She rated the guy with white hair a good D rank, but she didn't feel a magical aura from the main character. The stranger warned that in their team it is impossible to mess around, because after the raid, all resources are distributed according to the contribution, so if the guy messes around, he will not receive anything. Then the confident Jiang Mingyong asked if he would get more money if he contributed more. Next, events are transferred to the players' center in the head office. Let Li come in to ask why the guild council decided to hold an urgent meeting in the morning. The teacher immediately noted that she had done a good job during the assessment. His name was Sui Jinan, and the man explained that sectarian organizations have been looting recently. There have been several attacks on players across the country, so a large-scale check is needed, and besides, last week there was a collapse of the Shangjin Guild dungeon, and the investigation into this is still ongoing. It hasn't started yet. Let Li listen to her boss and first invite him to look at Jiang Mingyong's profile. Sui Jinan saw that he was only an E-rank player, and thought that he had already encountered some problems due to the woman's strictness towards newcomers. Instead, the examiner asked the man to watch the fight again via video, which she sent to his email inbox. The head appreciated the fight, but then he saw something that surprised him. First, in the video, Jiang Mingyong used explosive balls, which are characteristic of magicians. Then the guy used golden body defense, which belonged to a completely different class. For Sui Jinan, this was quite an interesting sight, even, so to speak, cheating in the world of players. Let Li also noticed this abnormality in the assessment, which confused her, so she asked whether this anomaly should be reported to the top. The manager asked to wait with this, because the guy still had no strength at all, and cheaters from other countries would immediately begin hunting him after learning such features. The woman noted that Jiang Mingyong's identity would still be revealed immediately after joining the guild. Sui Jinan knew a good place for a special player, so he asked a subordinate to send someone from the video and the skill stone to the Mad Tiger Guild. Meanwhile, Jiang Mingyong's team and the black-haired girl continued to sort things out over the weak player. In the end, she introduced herself as Su Yuding, a B-rank warrior, and explained that this was a D-rank dungeon, so she would be the one to lead the team. The girl asked to collect the participants' personal information to build a battle strategy and started with Jiang Mingyong. She noted that there was no government oversight of the dungeon, so someone might want to make money by following the team. The recording of information was completed, so the team headed into the dungeon. Then the main character realized that in this cave there was a monster's lair. From the entrance, our heroes were greeted by an armed society of D-rank goblins. Su Yuding told the team that there were about 30 goblins here and gave the order to prepare for battle. Someone suddenly rushed forward, so the commander asked what this person was thinking. It was Jiang Mingyong, who assured that the monsters would not be able to disturb the captain. The girl was angry that the new guy had just entered the dungeon and was no longer listening to her. The comrades looked at each other and realized that something had to be done. They also decided to go into battle, because Jiang Mingyong would have killed all the monsters on his own. Qian Shan already regretted bringing the guy here, because he was very clever. The commander was annoyed that the team acted as if they had never seen money before. She couldn't stand it and asked that at least a little be left for her. It turned out that this was the lowest level monster lair. Su Yuding killed only 3 goblins, because nothing else was left for her. She gave a thrashing to the uneducated, undisciplined guys, especially the main character, but he did not regret anything, because he killed the most goblins, namely 15. Jiang Mingyong understood that the spiritual crystals in such places were of low grade, but by walking through such places several times, one could gather a lot. The system offered the player to improve his skills for 40 kilograms of spiritual crystals. He understood that after improving 2 skills, the team would definitely notice a lack of crystals, so he decided to improve only the loser's aura. Su Yuting ordered our hero to stop giggling with stones in his hands, because they had to go to the next log. The road became wider and there were more spiritual crystals, so this meant that there must be another monster lair somewhere nearby. The blonde guy had tears in his eyes from the number of stones around him. The guys were happy, because now they would definitely become rich. The commander asked them not to run far and beware of traps. Qian Shan believed that there could be no monsters here, because, according to information, this was only a mine of spiritual stones, so he suggested that they quickly destroy the boss and divide the money. Jiang Mingyong knew that this was not true at all, because he mined ore all year round and knew that such a number of crystals did not correspond to a D-rank dungeon. Suddenly the main character heard some noise not far from the team. A crowd of monsters in the form of spiders was approaching the players. Jiang Mingyong notified his team and asked them to retreat as a large number of monsters were approaching here. It turned out that they accidentally fell into a nest of cave spiders. Qian Shan noted that although the enemies were only D-rank, they were present in large numbers, so he asked the commander how she planned to fight. There was no answer, so the man returned to call on the captain again. Terrifying monsters were getting closer and closer to the team. The whole team was already calling Su Yuting, but she did not respond to the call to her. The girl stood and made rather strange sounds. The guys thought that she was pranking them and noted that the commander had chosen the wrong time for this. Suddenly Jiang Mingyong stopped his comrade and asked him not to approach Su Yuting. The main character could not explain, but he felt that something wrong was happening to the captain. Suddenly she stood in a fighting pose and reached for her weapon. The girl's appearance changed greatly. Her whites turned black, her pupils turned red, and she herself had an unfriendly expression on her face. The comrades did not understand what was happening, so they were very scared. Jiang Mingyong guessed that there was definitely something wrong with this dungeon, and predicted that things would only get worse. At this moment, Su Yuting finally took out her blades and rushed towards her allies. The main character shouted for his comrades to retreat back. The guy barely had time to jump away from the commander's powerful attack. She did not stop and continued to quickly strike Jiang Mingyun, and he tried to talk to her. Next, the girl launched a kick, which finally reached its target, but the guy managed to block it. Jiang Mingyong flew down and noted that it was very painful. Su Yuting swung her hand to deliver the final blow, so our hero had no choice but to use the explosive ball. He directed a blow towards the commander and ordered her to finally come to her senses. The girl easily blocked the blow and as a result only a few small scratches remained on her hand. Jiang Mingyong almost ended this fight poorly for himself and noticed that his opponent fought too strangely and had a web behind her. The blonde guy thought that Su Yuting wanted to kill them to get all the money. Qian Shan denied such guesses, because the commander knew well, so he thought that she had fallen under the influence of an illusion or something similar. Then the main character realized that there was something wrong with the captain's fighting style, because she used brute attacks, although even novice warriors do not forget to use their martial arts skills. Jiang Mingyong compared all the factors and understood what was happening to Su Yuting. The comrades did not know how to remove the illusions, so they wanted to do it physically. The main character refuted their guesses, because she was controlled in a different way. He guessed that the commander controlled one of the spiders. The guy explained this by saying that, firstly, she made such obvious mistakes that even beginners don't make them, and simply attacked vital points, and secondly, there was a cobweb behind the girl. Then the comrade guessed that he just needed to cut off the connection with the spider, but Jiang Mingyun noticed that it was unlikely to be easy, because in their battle the web did not even move. In any case, the team had to come up with something, because there were more and more spiders. The main character noticed that the monsters were afraid of fire, so he asked Qian Shan to keep them at a distance using magic, and the white-haired one had to deal with the cave spiders. Jiang Mingyun himself was about to bring the captain back to normal, so he lunged towards her and used explosive bullets again. The guy skillfully accurately fired several projectiles towards the controlled Su Yuting. The girl tried to block Jiang Mingyong's numerous fire attacks. In the end, the main character caught the moment and used absolute precision. Su Yuting had her back turned, so she did not have time to react to the magic projectile. As a result, there was a loud explosion, and thick dust formed around the commander. Qian Shan asked if the guy had already resolved the problem with the team leader. The comrades could no longer hold the defense, because there were too many spiders, and they did not end. Jiang Mingyong thought he had succeeded because he shot straight at her back. Eventually, the dust and smoke cleared and it could be seen that Su Yuding had not regained consciousness. The guy was a little ashamed, because he inadvertently tore off the girl's armor, so her fragile body was visible, but there was no time to admire it. Jiang Mingyong realized that long-range attacks did not work, so he decided to switch to close combat. He attacked the commander in preparation for the attack and apologized in advance for the damage caused. Our hero grabbed the web and used magic to finally break the connection with the spider. The web was slowly burning out, and the guy believed that everything was finally over, and regretted that the cave was too dark and they could not see which spider did it. Jiang Mingyong wanted to deal with this monster, because he posed a great danger simply by controlling people. Meanwhile, the commander woke up and did not understand what the main character wanted to do to her in such a strange position. The guy explained to her that he only wanted to save her, but Su Yuding was tense because her clothes were torn in the chest area. In addition, her back hurt, as if after a fight, so she demanded that the guy explain everything to her. Jiang Mingyong excitedly lied that the spiders did it, taking control of her, and other monsters began to attack the girl, but Su Yuding still did not believe his words. The main character swore by Brother Qian, because he really tried to save the team captain. The comrade was not happy that his name was used in such a context, and asked whether Su Yuding had come to her senses. He asked the girl to come up and help them fight the spider invasion, because they would not be able to hold out for long. White-haired was already surrounded by monsters on all sides, and he asked his ally for fire support. He was upset because Qian Shan got right into his hair, which he had taken care of for so long and carefully. The commander understood that the situation was dire, so she decided to drink the potion. She was unhappy that they almost lost to several D-rank spiders. Jiang Mingyong suggested that the girl rest, because his support should have been enough. Su Yuding didn't want to stand by with such a minor injury and had already picked up the blade. She was confident and wanted to show her true strength as a B-rank warrior. After one attack by the captain, a dozen spiders were instantly chopped into pieces. Qian Shan noted that if the main character had admitted that it was he who tore the girl's clothes, then he would have had the same fate. The guy asked his friend to speak more quietly, because he did not plan to become the target of a B-rank player for the second time that day. Meanwhile, Su Yuding used the provoke combat skill. She stood surrounded, but radiated incredible strength and courage as she fought the monsters. The commander then used Earth Split and kicked the ground with all her might. The white-haired man admired Su Yuding's strength and noted that now the number of spiders did not matter, because they did not pose any danger. The captain ordered the guys to stop watching from the sidelines, and join the fight to finish off the small monsters, and prepare for the battle with the boss. The comrades immediately began to carry out the commander's order. Su Yuding thought that the main character lied to her after all, because cave spiders could only scratch and bite and do not use webs at all. These little spiders really couldn't have such high-level skills, which means they weren't the ones guiding the captain. Jiang Mingyong then realized that the web was also stretching from the top of the cave. The guy decided to point his palm towards the ceiling and use an explosive ball to illuminate everything around him. What he saw on the ceiling shocked our hero. From above, everything was intertwined with cobwebs, among which cocoons and mucus could be seen. Jiang Mingyong immediately warned his team that the monster that controlled the captain should be on the ceiling of the cave. The commander asked to illuminate the top again so that she could see that monster. The main character complied with the request and launched the projectile into the atmosphere. Qian Shan could not see the main spider at all due to the large amount of web. Jiang Mingyong could not understand why there was nothing from above, because, according to his guesses, the enemy should be there. He thought about how the captain was taken control immediately when they entered the dungeon. Dust suddenly fell from the ceiling, and at that moment the guy realized that all this time the enemy had been watching them from behind. An incredibly large spider crawled into our team. Jiang Mingyong shouted to Qian and warned the man that the enemy was right behind him. Having heard the warning from the guy, the comrade returned and was shocked by what he saw. The spider did not wait and pierced poor Qian Shan with its paw, not even giving him a chance to escape. The man screamed furiously from a serious injury to his shoulder. A huge spider emerged from a cloud of dust and looked like the worst nightmare with a huge mouth with scary teeth. The monster let out an incredibly terrifying scream and still held its first victim on its paw. The white-haired man was incredibly scared, because this was definitely not a D-rank boss. At this moment, the spider finally pulled its sharp leg out of Qian Shan's body. The wounded man fell to the floor from a fairly high height. The white-haired man watched this, so he began to tremble in fear and dropped his weapon from his hands. The frightened comrade believed that this was the end for them, because the monster's mana had already reached B rank and they definitely would not be able to defeat it. Jiang Mingyong was angry with himself because after seeing so many spiritual stones, he did not immediately realize that this dungeon was definitely not D rank. Meanwhile, the Abyss system sent our hero a task, which consisted in the fact that the guy had to kill a monster that possesses B rank spiders and receive a large reward for completing it. Such a seemingly impossible mission shocked the main character, who was only E rank. Meanwhile, Su Yuting ordered her allies to take Qian Shan and run away from here. She asked them to head to the player center and invite their help to this dungeon. Jiang Mingyong fearfully asked what the commander would do at this moment. The girl noted that she was a B-rank warrior and the strongest among the team. She believed that it was the captain of this raid who should have killed the boss monster of this cave. Su Yuting did not wait and, with a weapon in her hands, bravely rushed into battle with the giant spider. The main character tried to bring his white-haired comrade to consciousness in order to pull out and save Qian Shan. He still continued to be in shock and say that the captain would not be able to defeat this strong monster. Jiang Mingyong didn't understand what the comrade meant, because the commander was also B rank. White-haired noted that this is a completely different matter, because to kill such a monster you need 2 V-rank players or a team with professional equipment. Meanwhile, the spider released a powerful stream of poison from its mouth. Su Yuting masterfully avoided her enemy's poisonous attacks. Gradually she closed the distance to finally attack the monster. The girl had no idea that this creature attacks with poison and acid, which even corrodes stones. The spider noticed that Su Yuting was getting too close, so he tried to attack her with his legs. For the commander, this was a very convenient moment for the first attack. The girl did not wait and decided to quickly cut off one of the monster's legs. She accelerated to strike with her dagger, but it did not even penetrate the spider's body by a centimeter. His shell was too hard, which is why the weapon left only a small scratch. The spider attacked Su Yuting again, but she managed to react instantly and jump away from his paw. Jiang Mingyong warned the commander about the threat that was away from her. The other leg of the spider was already moving towards the girl for a further attack. She finally achieved her strength and hit Su Yuting directly on the head. As a result of such force, the girl, due to the fact that she did not have time to prepare for an unexpected attack, flew to the other end of the cave. The captain hit the dungeon wall with great force. Only then did she realize that the monster's defenses and powers far exceeded her own. A few seconds later, Su Yuting saw that the spider was already approaching her direction. The boss had already accelerated with his paw to deliver the final blow to his rival, and the girl could no longer do anything about it. Suddenly, the spider was attacked by numerous fireballs, causing it to be unable to complete its attack. Jiang Mingyong boldly remarked that he was saving the captain for the second time that day. Su Yuting instantly moved from her previous location. Suddenly she called our hero a fool, because he did not leave with his comrades, but decided to fight against the B-rank boss. The guy with a smile on his lips explained that he became a player only for big money, and such a monster was very expensive, so Jiang Mingyong could not allow the commander to take the entire reward for himself. He asked Su Yuting how much money he could get from a B-rank boss. The captain explained that such a monster could be used to make armor and B-rank weapons and also get about 1 million. Having heard such a large sum, the main character already imagined how much money he could get, and Su Yuting was annoyed that the guy was only thinking about profit, and not about his safety. The commander explained that this boss not only had a high level of defense, but also quite fast attacks. She didn't understand what an E-rank mage could do to such a powerful monster. Su Yuting did not understand why our hero took her hand, and thought that he was missing the fact that he had recently climbed on top of her. In fact, Jiang Mingyong just wanted to borrow a blade from her so that he could at least try to avoid his own death, rather than just sit and wait for her. The main character ordered the system to distribute all remaining points into agility. The commander considered the guy a rabid fool, because magicians must support attacks from the rear. She thought that Jiang Mingyong was even willing to face certain death for the sake of money. The guy was very lucky, because the spider almost hit him, although his agility level was pumped up, but our hero was exactly what he expected from a boss that costs 1 million. As a result, the monster was still able to touch the young man and leave a small scratch on his cheek. The main character understood that, no matter how good the defense, the boss still has a weak spot somewhere. Su Yuting saw how smartly the guy dodged the attacks, and could not believe that he was only an E-rank magician. Jiang Mingyong believed that the eyes are always a weak point, so he decided to launch a magic ball directly at the monster's face. A powerful and bright explosion appeared right in front of the spider's eyes. While the opponent was disoriented, the protagonist jumped up to strike with the blade. Su Yuting watched from the side and warned the guy to be careful. Then Jiang Mingyong looked to the side and realized what the commander saw. The spider's paw almost reached the guy and dealt a fatal blow. The main character was sure that it was the monster's eyes that he attacked, so he shouldn't have seen it. Su Yuting called him stupid again, because spiders had sensory organs other than just their eyes. She noted that the monster also had as many as 8 legs. At this moment, the main character noticed that a blue liquid was flowing from the spider's belly. Jiang Mingyong thought that it was blood and the monster was injured while he was rescuing the captain. The guy remembered that he had upgraded the aura skill for the losers and now he had the opportunity to hide his presence for 3 seconds. Finally, he asked the commander to do some hard work. The girl asked if Jiang Mingyong had any plan, and he explained that Su Yuting was supposed to provoke the spider and distract it, and the guy would deal a fatal blow at that moment. The commander was surprised by such a crazy plan, because she could only hold off the boss for a second, so she believed that there was no point in it. The main character assured that this time would be enough for him and asked Su Yuting to trust him. She squeezed the dagger in her hand and agreed to believe him, because the guy had already saved her life in this cave. The commander launched her attack and asked Jiang Mingyong to use this chance wisely. The main character at this time ordered the system to hide his presence. Su Yuting stopped in front of the monster to use her martial arts. She used the taunt skill to disorient the spider. The captain announced that now was the moment for his final attack. The main character accelerated to strike and hoped that his plan would work after all. He got caught and ended up ripping open the belly of a giant spider with the help of a borrowed blade. As a result, Jiang Mingyun received 200 awe points and 2 stat points, as well as the void ring. It appeared in the guy's hands and it turned out that the main function of the decoration was investigation vision. Meanwhile, Su Yuting reported that according to the contribution of each participant, Jiang Mingyun received 60%, the commander herself deserved 20%, and the white-haired and Qian Shan deserved 10%, respectively. The guys agreed to such conditions, because if it weren't for the main character, the senior magician would no longer be alive. The commander clarified that the total cost of the dungeon should reach 1 million, and suggested that the team finally get out of here. Jiang Mingyong walked out of the portal and stepped onto normal ground in the middle of the forest, not in the middle of that damned cave. He was glad to feel the fresh air and asked the captain to call him to the next dungeon. Now the events moved to the main character's house, where Taozi was talking with her mother. The girl said that Jiang Mingyong took part in the evaluation of the players today. The woman knew this very well, but given the guy's character, she understood that he could not be convinced, and besides, he did all this for the sake of his family. While they were talking, someone knocked on the front door of the house. Someone continued to actively knock, and the aunt thought that it was her nephew who had lost his keys again. She opened the door and saw a complete stranger in front of her. In front of her stood a stocky red-haired guy who was interested in Jiang Mingyong's presence at home. Meanwhile, the main character happily went home because he was able to buy gifts for his aunt and Taozi with the money he earned. The guy thought that his aunt would get worse and finally stop quarreling due to his desire to become a player. As he approached his house, he noticed that something rather strange was happening. The house was surrounded by people who looked very much like bandits, and the door was wide open. The guy with the eye patch rejoiced at the long-awaited arrival of their target. Jiang Mingyong, with a serious expression on his face, asked the strangers who they were and why they came to his house. A bandit with strange eyes and a mask on his face ordered our hero to leave quickly, because their boss was already tired of waiting. The guy only now noticed the wide open door and understood. The main character was worried, because his relatives could be in danger. Then he took off and instantly ran into the house. Mother and daughter sat frightened by the red-haired boss of this gang. The aunt's whole face was covered in beatings and she begged the guy to run away from here. Seeing this picture, Jiang Mingyong missed out on the gifts he had brought for his family. Jiang Mingyong became incredibly angry and asked how these scumbags dared to do this to his family. The gang leader, holding a glass of water in his hands, said that there was no need for such unrest. The stranger explained that the young master had specially called him, so the bandit thought that there would be a special target here, but he saw only a loser in front of him. Then Jiang Mingyong realized that it was Tokugawa who sent these people here. The main character noted that if there are complaints against him personally, then there is no need to touch his family. The bandit did not answer anything and looked at the guy with a piercing gaze. In the end, he unceremoniously slapped Jiang Mingyong's face hard. The guy with the eye patch noticed that our hero was in the wrong position to set his own terms. All the bandits began to take turns beating the main character. He was kicked hard in the stomach, causing him to bleed through his mouth. The hooligans did not stop and beat poor Jiang Mingyong in every possible place. The aunt could not stand watching these abuses, so she screamed and begged for the strangers to stop beating her nephew. The leader hit the woman in the face again and told the old hag not to interfere with him. Despite his own injuries, Jiang Mingyong ordered the scum to leave his family alone. Suddenly the boss took the tearful Taozi by the shoulder and said that he could fulfill the guy's request under one condition. He agreed to leave the family if the protagonist's sister served him well. Jiang Mingyong was already choking on his own blood, but he could only think about what kind of sick trash this red-haired guy was. At this moment, the young man went into a state of uncontrollable rage. Our hero realized that from the very beginning he was trying to balance on the brink of life and death only so that his family could live a better life. He remembered all his desperate fights with enemies who seemed impossible to defeat. Jiang Mingyong remembered that he had even survived the mine collapse, but now there was despair in his soul, so he thought that he still could not make his family happy. His mind was transported to a dark hall with a throne on which a stranger sat. The shadow with a confident smile on its face ordered the main character to get up. Shadow sat proudly on her throne and told Jiang Mingyong to stand up again. The beaten guy listened to her and found his last strength to stay on his feet. Suddenly the main character's eyes turned black, and his gaze became piercing and emotionless. This dark force gave the guy the strength to continue to fight the bandits and protect his loved ones. The bullies noted that he had strong bones, and the leader suddenly sensed changes in their opponent's magical aura. The guy with the bandage guessed that the young man was only fooling around, pretending that he was in great pain, because after such a beating a normal person would definitely not get up. The masked bandit got angry and decided to strike Jiang Mingyong in such a way that he would definitely never be able to get back on his feet again. The main character did not wait and immediately struck the attacker with his knee right in the chest. He believed that the only person who died was the bandit himself. The gang was angry that the guy was still able to respond to their attacks. The bandit with the bandage ordered his stupid comrades to immediately attack the guy, because he was only fooling around and pretending to be a weakling. Someone wrapped his arms around Jiang Mingyong and squeezed him tightly, so that he would definitely not break out of delight. An angry guy with one eye wanted to meanly hit the immobilized main character. He wanted to hit the guy right in the head and thus send him to hell, but it was not at all easy. The main character managed to escape the dangerous attack without any problems, so the bandit's foot flew straight into the face of his ally. The surprised guy with the bandage did not have time to react because he did not understand how it happened. Jiang Mingyong skillfully managed to get out of the hands of the bandit in order to deal with his daring partner. He immediately struck the eyeless bandit's leg to knock him to the floor. The guy then proceeded to attack the bully, who kept him enthralled and prevented him from moving. Jiang Mingyong sank his fingers into the bandit's nose with all his might. The main character easily got out of his hands and knocked this big guy to the floor. Taoji held her beaten mother and watched in amazement as her brother fought against the bandits. The gang leader appreciated the protagonist's perfect fighting skills. Then he understood why his young master Tokugawa was defeated by Jiang Mingyong. Although our hero's aura was very weak, he was able to kill all the red-haired bandits' allies without any problems. The guy's unequal fight with the hooligans really struck their stocky leader. He undressed because he told Jiang Mingyong that this was not the end of the battle. Although he and Tokugawa were of the same rank, the bandit was not as considerate as his master. The main character asked if his opponent had heard that thieves die from talking too much. The bandit threatened that this was the end for the guy and rushed into battle, but Jiang Mingyun continued to stand still. The red-haired burly man began to strike quickly without stopping, but our hero quickly avoided collisions with his opponent's hand. He noted that Jiang Mingyun was quite a skillful fighter. Suddenly the bandit decided to use a direct kick right to the head, so that the guy would definitely not have time to dodge such a powerful attack. In the end, Jiang Mingyun was faster and counterattacked his opponent so hard that he flew across the room and crashed into the wall. The bandit liked the young man's audacity and incredible strength, but he was still going to brutally finish him off. He assumed his special form and remarked that it was an honor for the protagonist that the opponent used this ability. The whole body of the robust man was covered with thick hair, and animal claws appeared on his fingers. His face became like a dog's and he explained that he now had the power of the real Arung. Now the bandit became even more stocky and looked like a real angry dog. He said that now their games were definitely over, but the main character did not agree with this, and a strange object began to appear in his hands. After some time, Jiang Mingyun stood with a sword in his hands and announced that their game was just beginning. The werewolf smiled and showed his sharp teeth. He thought that the main character was a boy who simply pretended to be a demon and did it even to the point of life and death. The bandit wanted to hit Jiang Mingyun, but he had a very impeccable reaction and blocked it. In the end, the werewolf was able to distract his opponent's attention in this way, while he quickly launched a side kick. The guy didn't have time to react in any way, so he couldn't stay on his feet and flew into the wall. It seems that our hero no longer felt pain at all, but was only determined to fight fiercely. The A-rank player ran towards his victim, believing that this was not the end of their battle. At the last moment, the guy managed to deftly retreat, so the bandit's hand only crashed into the wall. Before the werewolf had time to understand what had happened, Jiang Mingyun was already behind him and preparing for a counterattack. He took the dog-faced bastard by the head and with all his strength pressed his brutal face into the wall. The main character has already raised his blade to deliver the final blow to his opponent. The weapon flew into the air, and then made a rather large cut on the opponent's skin. The werewolf realized that things were bad, so he tried to respond to his opponent's lightning attack. And finally he managed to do it, so Jiang Mingyun received a very strong blow to the face. The main character did not expect such a strong response, so he fell again and flew away from his opponent. The bandit couldn't believe that the guy could still stand and noticed that he was hard to beat. The giant hoped that the guy was not going to tire him to death, and admitted that from the very beginning, the artifact in the hands of Jiang Mingyun seemed interesting to him, but he believed that nothing could be done about the fact that the best equipment in the hands of garbage became just as unnecessary. With a cheeky smile on his lips, our hero noted that it was true that by turning into an animal, a person also gets beastly brains. Jiang Mingyun suggested that his opponent first look at his seemingly incredibly strong and perfect body. The bandit did not understand what the young man meant, so he looked down to check himself. Only then did the opponent notice that our hero was still able to cut him, but for him it was only a small scratch. But then the bandit turned his gaze a little to the side and saw that his hand had been completely cut off. Only then did the werewolf feel the loss of a limb, so he screamed furiously. Meanwhile, Jiang Mingyun took off his sweater and announced that the warm-up was completed. Now the main character was ready to begin a real fierce struggle with his seemingly invincible rival. Events are transferred to another house, where someone was screaming and begging not to be killed. The man was on his knees and promised to give everything that his offender wanted, and promised to earn a lot of money, because today he became a player. The guy who was going to kill him said that there was no reason to be scared. The stranger promised that now the man would be with God forever. He grabbed his victim's face, sobbing in fear. Using magic, the guy mercilessly burned the player's face and called him a heretic. The strange magician believed that this would be an honor for the man, because now he could be useful to God. The young man now held a photograph of his latest victim on the list. A confused Jiang Mingyun, who had to finish the workday of a religious fanatic, looked at him from the photograph. Events returned to the main character's house, where his rival could not understand when the loser managed to cut off his ending. The bandit was confident in his strength, so he wondered how Jiang Mingyun was able to wound his flesh and do it with lightning speed. At this time, the guy had already rushed towards his opponent. he was no longer going to wait. He mockingly asked if an A-rank fighter could allow himself to be distracted during a battle. This ridicule made the werewolf angry, so he began to hurl insults at Jiang Mingyong. He hit the floor with all his force, causing her to simply smash into pieces. The young man continued to irritate his opponent and noticed that the ostentatious attacks, although beautiful, were of little use in practice. The werewolf's eyes filled with inhuman rage, and he was ready to tear our daring hero to pieces on the spot. Jiang Mingyong flew past like lightning and mockingly asked his opponent for permission to pass. The bandit's body was already completely bleeding, but he continued to stand on his feet. The guy struck him several times, but none of them seriously injured his opponent. Then the werewolf realized that the main character was using him as a toy and was simply mocking him. Rage was already filling the bandit's blood vessels, so he was not going to give up. Without feeling the slightest pain, he wanted to attack Jiang Mingyong and finally finish off his enemy. It seems that the main character was expecting just this, so without fear he announced that the game was now definitely over. The guy swung his sword in the air as the werewolf flew towards him. Then the bandit realized that now the end had definitely come for him, because he would not have time to escape the guy's attack. Bright rays cut through the stocky body of the werewolf and he screamed in horror in pain. The main character's attack force was so powerful that it destroyed the family building. Jiang Mingyong stood over the lifeless body of the scum and tried to catch his breath after such an intense fight. The shadow that controlled the guy mockingly noted that it seemed that his body also had its own limit. She decided to return Jiang Mingyong's body for now so that he would not die too quickly. In the end, the main character fell unconscious, and his sister was very scared for him. The strange religious fanatic watched from behind a tree and guessed that he had missed a good show, but the atmosphere in this house remained the same. The guy had a cut mouth under the mask and noticed with a smile that Jiang Mingyong smelled of blood and the smell of a god. He really wanted to taste our hero, but first he had to inform the bishop about him. At this moment, Jiang Mingyong's consciousness was in an amazing place where there was nothing. His shadow appeared behind him and asked the guy's opinion about this battle. She asked if the guy liked such a powerful and invincible force. Shadow believed that these capabilities greatly helped the main character, but this was not even their full power. Jiang Mingyong noticed that the strange creature had frightened him from the very beginning with its chatter to itself, and asked about its origin. Then the shadow showed its face and explained that it was the main character. Suddenly, Jiang Mingyong took a deep breath and jumped up, waking up in bed. He looked around the unfamiliar room he was in. As it turned out, our hero was in the hospital and at that moment there was a nurse with him. The guy immediately asked her with concern about his family. The nurse explained that the girl who brought Jiang Mingyong here was with her mother in room 3-12 and asked him to come there when he woke up. The main character ran like a bullet to his family, and the hospital employee asked him not to run, for which the guy apologized. He ran screaming into the room where his closest people were waiting for him. The out-of-breath guy saw that everything was fine with his sister, so he inquired about the condition of his aunt. Taoji happily congratulated her brother, who had finally come to his senses, and said that everything was fine with her mother. The doctor said that the woman needs to stay for another 2 days in the hospital under observation, and for now she is resting. Jiang Mingyong blamed himself for putting his family in danger and now in such a difficult situation. His sister tried to assure him that everything was fine, and was glad that they at least survived, which cannot be said about their house. The main character agreed with the girl and calmed down a little. After thinking a little about his sister's words, the guy noticed something that bothered him. Only a few seconds later, Jiang Mingyong realized that they no longer had a home, and out of desperation he shouted to the entire hospital. The main character asked if he and his rival really destroyed the building during the fight. Now Taozi's mood worsened and she irritably noted that after her brother became a player, he not only put his family in danger, but also left them without a home, and there was no money left for treatment, so tomorrow they could be kicked out of the hospital. The guy was scared to stay with his angry sister, so he decided that he would leave, rent an apartment and pay for treatment. Taozi stopped our hero because she had brought clothes for him from home. All of Jiang Mingyong's clothes were torn, so the girl suggested that he change clothes in the bathroom and then go about his business. The main character promised to replace his sister in looking after his aunt when he arrived, and Taoji asked him to rent a cheap apartment. After leaving, the guy thought that such fights hit the team hard, and hoped that the resources from yesterday's dungeon had already been sold. He opened his account on the phone and saw that he was paid 150,000 more. As it turned out, it was his comrades who decided to thank him for saving their lives. Jiang Mingyong was delighted with such a useful gift, because he still had a debt of 3.5 million. In addition, the guy could not believe that he had dealt with the bandit of the Tokugawa family, because all the memories were very vague. Suddenly, someone turned to our hero behind his back, to which he reacted instantly and nervously due to recent events. In front of the guy stood a beautiful girl whose name was Li Wen. She was the president of the Brave Guild and came to visit Jiang Mingyun. The guy asked if they knew each other, because many events from yesterday were lost in his memory. Li Wen confirmed that they really didn't know each other, but she wanted to talk to the main character, so she suggested moving to a quiet place. The beauty of the stranger charmed the main character, so he was ready to do anything for her. Jiang Mingyun led her to a bench on the street, believing that it was a quite secluded place for a private conversation, and the girl thought it was funny. The main character decided to say everything directly, because he believed that the head of the guild decided to personally visit the weak player not in order to offer to meet, and certainly not to invite him to the guild. The guy seriously asked about Li Wen's intentions and cautiously asked if Tokugawa had sent her. The girl denied her connections with Tokugawa with disgust and noted that the main character had already become definitely not a weak player. Although he received a player's license of the entire E rank according to the certification assessments, the guy was able to defeat Tokugawa himself. In addition, Jiang Mingyong was able to kill a B rank player sent by his rival, but only a few people knew about this, although Li Wen was sure that the whole city would soon know these achievements. The girl again spoke with irritation about the Tokugawa scum, whom our hero humiliated twice, and she was sure that he would not simply accept his defeat. Meanwhile, Jiang Mingyong was carefree eating the fruits that the stranger brought him, which made her angry, because she thought that the guy was not listening to her at all. Li Wen continued her story about Tokugawa and noted that he relied on the influence of a corporation called Miracle, which was engaged in biological research. The main character, with a mouth full of food, became interested when he heard about the company. Meanwhile, several black cars arrived at the hospital. It seems that someone from the highest circles of society also attended them. He was a fair-haired, stately man, and his assistant said that, according to information from the operational headquarters, the guy they needed was hospitalized here yesterday. The stranger asked his assistant to take him to the right patient. At this moment, Jiang Mingyong was nervous because he didn't know if Miracle Corporation could cause him any harm. Li Wen explained that the company is studying monsters and enhancing the abilities of players, and the special skills of the main character interested scientists. Suddenly the guy tensed, because the stranger knew about his characteristics, so she could pose a danger. Jiang Mingyong angrily asked what this suspicious girl knew about him. She explained in detail that the guy was a warrior player, but he could use magic, and just by looking at his ID in the actual battle, some conclusions can be drawn. The main character noticed that the girl knew a lot, so he could not understand what she wanted from him, and Li Wen only wanted Jiang Mingyun to join their guild. The guy asked again, because he was surprised by such a proposal, and the girl repeated that she wanted our hero to join the Guild of Daredevils. She promised to provide him with rewards for completing dungeons, and to provide the family with new housing. Such conditions sufficiently satisfy the immediate needs of the protagonist, so he thought about it. The guy thought that this was the best option for him now, but their conversation was suddenly interrupted by someone. A man who had recently arrived at the hospital and was looking for a specific patient greeted the main character and offered to first listen to his proposal and then make his choice. Li Wen warily asked the strangers who they were and the reason for their visit to the guy. The man explained that they belonged to the Miracle Organization, namely a department in Country Z, and today he came to deliver messages from the company to Mr. Jiang. Then the main character became nervous and thought that it was reinforcements from Tokugawa. Jiang Mingyong clenched his fists and remarked that if strangers want to create new problems and fight, then they need to move to another place. The husband assured that they did not want to become enemies with the main character. He hoped to befriend Jiang Mingyun and Li Wen to work for their Miracle Organization. The girl stated that the young man already belongs to her guild, so the man may not even dream of getting our hero. The stranger tried to calm the clan leader and noticed that the guy still had not agreed to join the guild. Jiang Mingyong confirmed that he really still had not responded, but was simply thinking about the proposals, and the fact that two groups came for him a day meant that our hero was simply an incredibly talented player. The husband recommended that the guy listen to the organization's proposal, because they knew about the difficult financial situation of the protagonist's family, but for Miracle such amounts were trifle. After Jiang Mingyong joins them, the company promises to immediately pay off his large debt. Li Wen noted that it was just money, and the guild could also quickly get it by making several raids on the dungeon with rewards. The husband asked how many dungeons they needed to raid to get as much as 3-5 million. The clan leader was incredibly surprised by the amount she heard, and Jiang Mingyong was embarrassed by her violent reaction. Meanwhile, a Miracle employee handed over a small box with a strange key inside, and the man explained that he was doing this to show the sincerity of his intentions. The company gave the guy's family a luxury apartment that they could move into any time they wanted. Jiang Mingyong thought that he was being lied to, because the box contained only a strange card, but the employee irritably explained that this mansion does not use keys to open doors. The girl was sure that the main character would not behave in such feigned generosity and would not make a choice in favor of the organization, because the guild, although it did not have such good conditions, could help solve all the players' problems. The man noted that the guy was already very happy and did not pay attention to the words of the clan leader. Li Wen was annoyed that Jiang Mingyong was able to throw away his brains and change his mind so quickly. Still, she continued to persuade the members of the organization to give up, because the company worked for the Dechuan family, so perhaps the guy was a sheep who was heading straight into the tiger's den. The man knew about this conflict and perfectly understood the dissatisfaction of Jiang Mingyong and the Dechuan family. In his opinion, it was just a small quarrel, and if the main character joined Miracle, the man promised to resolve this issue, because he believed that the Dechuan family would not find the guy and would not cause him problems. The young man understood that if he could not deal with the Dechuan family, he would not be able to live peacefully in the city, but now this problem can be solved, albeit temporarily. Li Wen couldn't believe that Jiang Mingyong would accept the offer from her competitors, since the guild had also promised to provide protection for the gambler's family. In the end, the main character decided that he would accept the offer and join the Miracle organization.